and welcome here this evening to this study session. We're going to go ahead and start with the first presentation, and I believe it's the Sun Corridor. Or are you guys going to present this, or?
So I'll introduce the Safe Routes to School team.
Perfect.
Yep.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Natalie Stevens. I'm with the Public Works Engineering Department, and I'm here with Clark Klattenoff, our City Traffic Engineer. This evening, Kristen Hockham with Alta Planning will present our Safe Routes to School findings and go over the key findings and our next steps for the project. With that, I'll hand it over to Kristen. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, Madam Mayor and City Council, City staff. Thank you so much for allowing me to share this project with you tonight. Here's our brief agenda. We're going to give you an overview of the project, discuss some of the outreach and engagement we conducted as part of the Safe Routes to School project. We'll share what we saw and we heard from your community. I'll also highlight some preliminary recommendations with my colleague Elizabeth Barn-Hansen. We'll show you a suggested route map sample. Happy to take any questions and answers, and then we'll discuss next steps. As a reminder, the project team was made up of the Sun Corridor MPO, City of Casa Grande, our team Alta Planning Design, and our partners Horrocks Engineering. The Sun Corridor MPO secured funding from the Arizona Department of Transportation Transportation Alternatives Program to conduct a safe routes to study at all of your public and private schools and charter schools in the city. This funding was used to conduct walk audits, which are a way for us to go out and talk to parents, caregivers, school staff about their challenges for transportation safety around their school. We solicited input from the city's website and a webpage on the city. We attended public events to talk about the project and to solicit additional information from community stakeholders. Now we're talking about developing and prioritizing strategies. We'll share a little bit about that in a moment. The goal is to provide clear, implementable recommendations, both infrastructure and programmatic, to make walking and biking to school safer and more comfortable for students and their families. Here's our project timeline. We started back in spring of 2025, visiting all of your school sites. We did data collection in the form of surveys and student tallies. We conducted outreach events over the summer and just recently this fall. We continued walk audits at each school in the city. And now we're in the process of developing our final recommendations, which will be included in the final study. Tonight I'm here presenting to you all, and then ultimately we'll be presenting the final study to the Sun Corridor Metropolitan Planning Organization Executive Board in January. And then in spring of 2026, we intend to apply for additional funding to build out some of the projects we've recommended. Here is a quick snapshot of some of the outreach we did. I mentioned we conducted walk audits at each school, so here are some photos from there. We had a really nice article featured in the Pinal Central. If you haven't read it, I highly encourage you to do so. It's a really good snapshot of what the project was, but also how involved the city, your city staff, and the Sun Corridor MPO staff have been on the project. Here's some pictures from some outreach we did. We attended the Silent Witness Night pop-up event on September 23rd, where project staff, MPO staff, as well as city staff told people about the project and asked them to fill a survey. We also passed out stickers and coloring pages just to get people interested and excited about the project. The staff were out at the Harvest Festival last Thursday night, also passing out stickers and soliciting input from community stakeholders. Here is a picture from our webpage on your city website. All right, now I'm going to tell you a little bit about what we saw and we heard when we were out at the schools. What we saw is that Casa Grande has a lot of great bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure already. And then we saw these signs, these stop when children in crosswalks everywhere, which is really great to see. I was impressed by the immense school staff support for crossing students and their overall student safety. School buses were supporting a lot of transportation, supporting the general multimodal transportation network. And one of the things we saw, noticed, and also heard was that schools in the surrounding neighborhoods could use a little bit more shade. What we heard from stakeholders is that drivers are speeding near schools. and that drivers do not yield to students and others in the crosswalk. We also heard that sometimes drivers ignore crossing guards, which is very scary for those crossing guards. Students dart through parking lots, and parents and caregivers sometimes encourage their students to cross at locations that aren't at a crosswalk. And in general, there's not enough space for pickup drop-off on and off campus. Based on our survey, our community survey, we asked respondents to tell us what was their major issue of concern. And the majority, slight majority, said that street crossings were a safety concern, followed by safety and driver behavior, with far distant fourth and fifth, comfort, and sidewalks. I'm now going to invite up Elizabeth Barnes-Hanson from Horrocks to talk to us a little bit about our preliminary infrastructure recommendations.
Hi, thank you for having me this evening. So I am a transportation engineer with Horrocks on this team. I'm the lead engineer on this project. I have 12 years of experience in the field, broad roadway, focusing on multimodal, so bike and ped. So talking a little bit about the preliminary and I gotta figure out how to work this thing. So preliminary recommendations, we really tried to have a wide range of recommendations for each school site. Stuff that's easy to implement, quick build, if you will, whether it's striping crosswalks, buffered bike lanes, that sort of thing, adding additional signage as well, and then ramping it up to more complex recommendations that might mean signal modifications with a leading pedestrian interval that allows pedestrians to have more time to cross. It could be traffic calming items, traffic circles, raised crosswalks, chicanes, curb bump outs, those items that are kind of more intense infrastructure, replacing curb ramps that don't meet ADA and PROAG requirements anymore, all the way up to suggesting signals, hawk signals, rectangular rapid flashing beacons, those sort of items. So it's kind of a broad range of recommendations, and I didn't want to have recommendations that are, that we could do right now. I wanted to go beyond that. What is the wish list for these schools if we could do whatever we wanted? And really have that as a baseline, especially for funding, having those kind of wish list items of what would make these school sites work better. And we're not just looking at school sites, we're looking off-site as well. So, for instance, this one is Saguaro Elementary, which shares a campus with Casa Grande Middle School. Each site, we're really showing, okay, what is the existing drop-off and pickup? Where could we fill in sidewalk? We saw a lot of sidewalk on campus, but not necessarily extending to these roads and extending to the neighborhoods. So that's a really easy infill the sidewalk so that kids can actually get to school on a sidewalk. And it just makes the parents more comfortable. We're looking at what's the existing, pick up and drop off, but also what are the locations nearby that parents use that might not be school sanctioned, and continuing that use if there's no issue. This one gets even more unique where there's a trail behind the school. So is there a potential for a trailhead nearby? That would be great. And so we kind of tailored them to each school site. In this case, we're right off of Pinal Ave. I can't do much with Pinal Ave. McMurray maybe a little bit more, but with these schools that are tucked into neighborhoods, we can really suggest a lot more traffic calming options because that's really a continuous issue that schools, parents that we witnessed, drivers, speed, as we mentioned, especially at Cottonwood Elementary, they mentioned the speeding and they brought up speed humps. We did suggest speed cushions as an alternative. That gives you the wheelbase so emergency vehicles aren't impacted by the speed hump. They can just go straight through the speed cushion. But for that school, I suggested a traffic circle, curb bump outs, a raised crosswalk, really try to get people to slow down. You know, I saw parents pick up and then speed off and not want to stop for the crossing guard, so we want to avoid that. So that's just kind of our wide variety of recommendations that we have come up with for every school.
For each school, we created these suggested route maps. These are maps of today's infrastructure. So these might change in the coming years, but they're designed to show parents and families, students, that walking and or biking to school isn't as hard as it might seem. So you'll see there's times and distances on each of the maps with safety tips. We sent these out to each of the schools last week, and we've got some feedback, so we'll be updating these for each school so that they're reflective of the conditions, their walking and biking conditions near their school. And at this time, I'd love to answer any of your questions.
Thank you. Okay, any questions, comments? Sure, Matt.
You guys mentioned it, but like one of my biggest pet peeves is people who speed through school zones. I know you can do safe routes. Is there any education piece that you guys have or anything to help us promote that? Because even the one I'm now that has the hot crosswalk with all the flashing lights, people still, I'm like, come on. You know?
Yeah, those are part of our programmatic recommendations. It's educating parents, neighbors about slowing down, reminding them they're in a school zone, also getting the students involved and reminding their parents that they should be slowing down and driving slowly in a school zone. It's a multi-layered problem and approach, so that's why we marry what Elizabeth does with the programmatic side.
Any other comments?
I just comments, not a question. I just think that you all did an amazing job. I had a chance to work with you, both as someone on city council and as a principal, and I just appreciate the time and effort that you put into this. When you ask any administrator, what is your number one priority, it's always safety. And so looking at what's outside of our school, and sometimes what we feel like maybe we don't have control over, you guys providing this, I think, is just amazing for our students and our families. So I really appreciate the time and effort that you all put into this.
Thank you so much, Councilwoman.
Thank you. Any other comments?
No.
Well, good. Well, we look forward to the recommendations and the funding that we're going to get for this, right?
That's right. That's what's next, is apply for funding. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay. So next, Larry, is this you?
It's actually our planning department, Madam Mayor, but perhaps I can set the tone just briefly as they're coming up to the podium to introduce the speaker. I know that the council is aware of one of the new requirements by state statute that each city must complete an affordable housing study within every 5 years, essentially. Dan's probably going to talk a little bit about that, so I don't want to go too far in depth, but ultimately Casa Grande was in the front end of these affordable housing studies, and so I'll let Dan make the introduction.
Thank you. I won't touch too much upon that. I'll leave it up to Rick Merritt, who I introduce. He's with Elliott Pollock and Company. The city did receive a grant for $107,000 from the Arizona Department of Housing to perform an affordable housing study. Staff has been working closely with Mr. Merritt, and after about 4 draft revisions of the plan, staff is very happy with the final product, and it provides staff with an action plan and strategies that Mr. Merritt will go over with you.
Okay. Thank you.
There he is.
It's a pleasure to finally be in front of you tonight and to talk about the affordable housing plan that we've been preparing over the past few months. I'll jump right into it. I have a few slides to go through. I can figure out how to use this. There we go. So what is affordable housing? You hear a lot about it now. The states has a lot of legislation affecting it. And so you hear a lot about affordable housing, attainable housing, workforce housing, missing middle housing. Regardless of whatever you think it is, a household should not spend more than 30% of their income on housing. And that's the goal of all these projects and studies that we work on. Affordable housing is typically used to describe housing for low and moderate income households that earn less than 60% of the area median income, and for a family of 3 in Casa Grande, that would be $60,600. And usually the resources to provide housing for these people come from public housing, which is very little of it in Casa Grande. It comes through the county today. Low-income housing tax credit projects, which I'll talk about because you've gotten a lot of those lately over the past couple of years, and vouchers, which are also distributed by the Housing Authority. When we talk about workforce housing, we're talking about households that earn too much to be in subsidized or financed housing. And so they earn too much for that, but they don't earn enough to really make it affordable to them through market rate housing. So we also often refer to them as critical service personnel. They can be teachers, police, firefighters, construction workers, people that are really needed in the community to make the economy work. We also talk about missing middle housing. And what missing middle housing is a type of housing between single family housing and, as you can see on the right side, large mid-rise type of apartment buildings. So in between are the types of units that are more clustered, they're more affordable, they're a little bit smaller, and so they become affordable for workforce housing to speak of. So it can be duplexes, fourplexes, courtyard housing, townhomes, things like that. And you do have some of that in the city today, but there probably needs to be more of it to be for workforce housing to afford them and actually get into the housing market. So I want to talk a little bit about demographics of Casa Grande. You have a median age that's below the statewide average. You have a pretty typical household size. Owner-occupied units have a little bit larger households and renters. The big thing is, of course, everybody's looking at household income. You have a mean income of $93,000 and a median income of about $66,300. Both of those are below the statewide average, actually below the countywide average. So there is an indication, a need here in the community for affordable housing. In terms of your forecasted population, this comes from MAG. You're expected over the next 16 years or so to grow by about 25,000 people. You can see you're still going to be one of the larger communities. Maricopa has overtaken you in size, and now we have Santan, which is probably going to be about the size of Maricopa at this point. But you are, population or not, you are the economic heart of Pinal County. All the retail that's here, all the manufacturing, the warehousing, you got the rail, so you have a lot of things going for you here. You, regardless of population, you're the economic center of the county. So based on the population demand, we see that there's a housing demand for about 9,800 units over the next 15, 16 years. And you can see what that means on an average per year. It's quite a bit less than what you've been producing in the recent years on an annual average, but it's still quite a bit of housing still to be developed in the community. So the housing market really has been, put on its head because of what's going on across the country and the increase in prices that we've seen. In terms of building permit activity, you can see where you were back in 2021, and even before that, a lot of single-family housing, but you get to 2023 and 2024, and you start to see the multifamily housing. You've really been discovered as a place that needs housing, needs multifamily housing, and the developers have come here and built those units. And so that there's quite a bit of inventory available to you, and we see additional units probably coming down the pike for you. We looked at all the conventional market rate apartments that are here. There's about 2,568 units that we call traditional apartments, and then you have the build-to-rent, the single-story, independent, unattached units that you've seen. Quite a few of those developed, 900 or so. So you're all of our market inventory is about 3,500 units of conventional housing. There's a lot of other types of units, smaller units, 3 and 4 plexes that are out there, but these are the conventional units. And then when you get to the affordable market inventory, most of these on the top part of this slide are tax credit projects. And you can see the newly approved tax credit complexes that have come in. So you had 832 tax credit units. Some of them are rather old, and they lose their commitment to maintain their affordability. Many of them, studies have shown that many of those units still stay affordable just because they can keep their vacancy rates very low, and so we have found that to be the case in a lot of instances. But you're almost doubling the amount of tax credit projects that you've had in the past. Just in the last couple of years, 756 units are on the board, under construction, some of them. The Casa Grande Phase 1, the Gorman project, is still in the contingency due diligence phase from what I understand, so that could still be coming forward. And then under construction units, you have, once again, the affordable 692 units, and market rate total, from what we understand, is over another 700 units. So still a lot of activity going on. This will take several years for the market to lease up these projects and to get back to a normal vacancy rate. Your vacancy rate's a little high at this point, but it's going to take a little bit of time for that to straighten out. So the average apartment rent went from about a little over $1,000 a month to $1,455 in 2022. It's down now to about $1,350, and it's down because of all the apartment development that's occurred and the vacancy rate that's a little bit on the high side right now. So a big increase in apartments. In single family, the resale prices have gone up about 64%, an increase of $131,000 since 2019. The number of sales is down some from when it was in 2021, but you're still looking at about $136,000 for the average for sale resale unit. And then if you look at new home sales, that has increased by about $150,000 over a 3-year period. It hit 385,000, and it's down now to about 353,000 in 2024. So prices are declining to some extent because of the market, a slowdown in the market, those types of things. We looked at what it would take to purchase, or what can the median price or the median household income afford in the community. And this is based on 6.65% interest rate. Interest rates are all over the place at this point. And already it's down to about 6.2 at this point. So this is a little bit outdated even over the past few weeks since we put this together. But somebody with a $66,000 income could afford at that point $238,000. You can see your housing prices are well above that. Even with a decline in the interest rate, it's going to make a little bit of difference, but it's still not going to get a household up to the point where they can afford the typical home in Casa Grande. So we talk about what the housing gap is. The gap is the difference between what's affordable for people and what's out there in the market. And in this case, we look at the census data, and they provide us information on how many households are spending more than 30% of their income on housing, and how many are spending 50%, which is severely burdened households. So you have 2,900 households, renters, that spend more than 30%. It's about 48% of almost half of all renters are housing burden. And then within that amount, are another 1,200 households to spend more than 50%. You can see your numbers are a little bit higher than the Pinal County averages and a little bit about equal to what the state is experiencing across the state at this point. So, but clearly a difficult situation for most renters in the city. And when we look at owner-occupied units, there's about 3,400 households that spend more than 30%, about 23% of all homeowners are burdened by housing at this point. We also point out there's a lot of at-risk households that need to be impacted by whatever housing programs you elect to adopt at this point. One is the female householders with no spouse present, no husband. And if they, a lot of them have children that they care for. And you can see the difference in incomes, household incomes compared with a male householder or even a married couple householder, which is at the very top there. Married couple householders are making roughly upwards of $90,000 a year, where a female householder, even with children, is $42,000. So that's one of your at-risk targets we think you should really focus on. And the other is seniors. Seniors account for 31% of all households in Casa Grande who spend more than 30% of their income on housing. About half of them, more than half of them, spend more than 30% of their income on housing. So there is a need for that to be a component of your affordable program. This is a graphic, an interpretation of how we think the Casa Grande market is working. And on the bottom, you see the incomes categories of people. And up to about $50,000 in income, there's a deficit of housing affordable to those households. So what they are required to do is they are forced to go into the area where there's a surplus of housing, and that's where they start to spend more than 30%. Or they have to find a roommate, or they have to double up somehow in relatives or something like that. Otherwise, they're put into that area of surplus. At the other end, there's also a deficit of high-end rental units, and 15% of renters earn more than $100,000 of income. So they could easily afford higher rent, but they choose because part of it is they don't need to spend that much. And the other part of it is they can find units that are more affordable to them in that surplus area that we show there. So that's how we think the market kind of works at this point, and it puts a crush on those center areas where the surplus of units. And that's where it's difficult for people to find housing, rental housing. So we looked also at affordability by occupation, and you can see the types of occupations, and you can see the monthly affordable rent less utilities. And we took out, I believe, $150 for utilities. So what the rent that they can afford is on the far right of that table. And you can see if your typical rent today is $1,300 a unit, there are very few households that can afford those types of units. They get into middle school teachers and school teachers that are right there just at that point, but it's really registered nurses, patrol officers that can afford that those rents more. So once again, difficult. And just to talk about the economy in general, you need people in service jobs to make the economy work. We've done work in Sedona and Prescott. They have very low labor force participation rates in the 40% range, should be up in the 60% range. And so they don't have the service providers to provide for the retired population. And you're certainly a long way from that happening, but I think there's a recognition that you need housing for all types of households and occupations to make the economy work right. We looked at future housing demand. we looked at what households would be coming into the city in the next 15 years. About 2,900 we think are going to be demanding rental housing. And then when you get to $50,000 to $100,000 in income, there's about almost 3,500 of those households, and hopefully they'll be looking for ownership housing. So it's really important, once again, for that group to be able to own a home, have a starter home for them to get into the market in ownership housing. So our housing strategy, and we've talked to the staff about this, but there's a housing goal we're establishing, and that is to create or preserve 2,000 affordable and workforce housing units through 2030. That's a pretty big target to go for. And that includes the construction of new units plus rehab that the city does today with block grant funding. And we know that affordability cannot be accomplished without higher density housing products, which you already have a lot of today in the community. You just need more of it. So cluster homes, townhomes, apartments, modular, manufactured homes, things that are really what is needed. So just real quickly to go through, townhomes are on the right, common wall buildings. We see a lot of those starting to be built across the valley today. Cluster complexes, the builders call them 6 or 8 packs, where they have shared alleyways, and they do have garages typically, but more clustered and on smaller lots. Duplexes, small lot, single family are a lot of alternatives. ADUs, I know you've worked on the accessory dwelling unit provisions of your code. Manufactured homes are starting to look more like stick-built homes at this point. We should see more and more of that. There's more companies coming out with that. So those are the types of facilities that you really need to accommodate your future housing. So we have an action plan, a variety of objectives. What we really started to look at was, what are the resources you need to support production of affordable housing? We're talking about establishing a housing trust fund where you would have fund that comes into, that is placed in a fund in the community, and it can be used for all different kinds of housing purposes. Work with nonprofit partners, promote affordable or development of low-income housing tax credit projects, which you're already doing right now to a large extent. Look at school district excess land, maybe establishing a down payment assistance program, increase your staff resources. So there are, Mary has done a great job here in the city working with us, but there may be additional resources that are needed to really promote a program for affordable housing. We've talked about looking at the city's development standards and regulations so they're not a barrier to affordable housing. And then there's a variety of tools that we think should be considered in whatever program, ultimate program you develop. There's a government property lease excise tax, which you've used, I think, periodically. Which can be used for housing the city of Phoenix. If you've ever driven down to downtown Phoenix, all those residential high-rises are on GIPLETs, and it gives them an eight-year abatement on property taxes. So Phoenix has 71 GIPLETs, something like that. They've used them very effectively, particularly for affordable housing. A community land trust, that can be done through nonprofit partners. Your industrial development authority can issue bonds for affordable housing. And just a couple weeks ago, as I was doing research to finalize this report, I realized that your IDA provided financing for 3 apartment complexes back in the 1980s. And I don't know if anybody even knows that at this point, but it can be done over and over again and using that very important source. Those are some of the things we've come up with in terms of a variety of tools that are available. Maintain the existing affordable inventory is very important. Keep using your block grant funding for for emergency rehabilitation, monitor the gentrification of older neighborhoods, those types of things. And then support your homeless resource center, establish an educational campaign on the benefits of affordable and workforce housing, and monitor the progress in achieving the housing goals. So those are the main plan and objectives, and this is the action plan that we put together for this. Just to give you some idea of the available tools and how they affect the cost of development for housing. So on the left side are some of the tools. The community land trust in particular can take 15 to 20% out of the cost of housing. If you have a community land trust, you can do land banking, you can do density bonuses, things like that. The soft costs, waiver permit fees, impact fees, expedited reviews, all those things help to reduce the overall cost for a development. And lastly, hard cost of construction, waiving construction sales tax, reducing parking requirements, things of that nature that can reduce the hard cost of development. And those are the types of things that are all going to be really needed to promote affordable housing in the community, and in particular to start to work on housing for the workforce, basically. Housing so that people can purchase homes. They're not stuck in rentals forever. It's becoming more and more difficult for people to purchase a home. Down payment requirements are very extensive. So we think that's one of the important things to really focus on. And with that, we'd be happy to answer any questions. It's been a pleasure working with the city. We think you have a really bright future here. And once again, there's no reason to think you're not going to stay the economic center of Pinal County for a long time here.
Thank you, Rick. Rick, how many community outreach events did you have?
We had one in the very beginning and then one later on where I think you were at the second one.
I was at one.
And we did I didn't mention, we did a survey of the residents. It was online. I think we had 500 or 600. I don't know if you remember, Mary.
Okay.
It was a really good response. So we had an online survey that was really helpful for us.
Okay, good, thank you. Well, thank you. Any questions, comments? Sure.
A lot of good information, and I think it's information that we can use frequently because we get asked about these things. I did notice that it was labeled as a draft. What's the next steps, and when is it made public or given to us so that we can share it?
It's basically in its final form, and after these meetings, we have a meeting with the Planning Commission on Thursday, and we will finalize it. There's a couple little changes we want to make to it, but that'll be the end of it then.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Sure, ma'am.
You had some good data in there about multifamily housing vacancy rates. What is that? What's the average? I mean, what do they shoot for on the vacancy rate, industry standard?
The industry standard is probably about 7%, and that allows for people to turn over in apartments, for people to move out and be released in. So you're quite a bit above that right now just because of what's been built.
Yeah, I mean, plus a lot of them are newer, right? So, I mean, they're just haven't leased out yet.
Yes,
Part of it.
exactly, yep.
Any other questions, Matt? Was that it? Okay. Any other questions, comments?
I guess I know a lot of the feedback from the community is, of course, they think we have enough apartments. If I'm not mistaken, on I think it was page 27, it was showing where we're going to have to add even more in the next 5 years. Was that what I was reading in that?
Well, I think that should be part of it.
Part of it.
You've gotten so many, and some are under construction right now,
right.
that it will take a few years for those to lease up.
Right.
But I think it's always got to be a component of it. But I really think, there's other things that you can really work on. The community land trust is a really good opportunity, I think, for you to start to take a look at. The downtown area in particular has very modest cost housing. And I can tell you, we're doing a study for the city of Chandler. There's a group called Newtown Community Development Corporation. They do, I don't know if they operate in Pinal County, to tell you the truth, but they do community land trusts. They went out in Chandler and, a few years ago, bought 70 houses, and they then turn around and sell the building. They hold the land, but they sell the building to individuals who make maybe 80% of median income, something like that. They can't buy any more housing in Chandler because it got too expensive. But I think it's a real opportunity here that you could do the same type of thing in your older parts of the community where housing is a little less expensive, and regenerate the neighborhoods, those types of things. So I think that's a big part of it. And apartments are always going to be one part of it, but I think getting into those types of units that are affordable for purchase is another opportunity for you to really concentrate on.
I thought the one slide was interesting when it had the dates that some of these apartments were built, because we tell people that all the time, that we haven't built an apartment complex in over 20 years. And it's amazing when people ask, where are all these people coming from? Where are they working? Well, if they would just go over here, down the street here in the Sierra Industrial area, a lot of people don't realize the growth and expansions that are going on with a lot of these companies too. So, so it was good to see your, population forecast and the need, and, we're trying to plan to make things more attainable and affordable in the near future. So, no, great studies. So I guess at this point, Larry, we're gonna have to see, it was nice to see the strategies and, some of the ideas. So now it's all about implementing and find out how we're gonna move forward on this, right?
Madam Mayor, that's actually the comment that I was going to make, is that obviously we'll take it to the Planning and Zoning Commission for their input, and then ultimately bring the document back to the staff level and begin to incorporate some of the tools and some of the action items into our strategic planning process, into our action plans. So you'll begin to see some of the, what I consider to be actionable items beginning to be disseminated through our strategic plan as part of our budget process.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Mary, did you have something? Sure.
Yeah.
One of the requirements for the grant was that we bring it back to you guys to adopt some of that stuff. So
Okay.
I'm thinking potentially in the next couple of months,
Right.
we'll pull it all together, but it does come back for you guys to officially
So
adopt.
the final,
Yes.
okay.
Yes.
And Mary, thank you to you and your staff because I know you were coordinating a lot of the events, and so thank you for working with them.
Thank you.
Okay,
I have
sure,
just
go
one
ahead,
quick
Sean.
question. You may have the answer for this. I was kind of wondering on the renters, the owners of these apartment complexes, what % occupancy do they have to be at to become profitable? Would you
It's
know that?
probably about the 7%.
It is that 7%?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay,
And you can see the incentives are out there now, I think, in a lot of the communities.
okay,
So they're trying to get there, yeah.
okay, thank you.
I have a question. So based on all this information, do you feel that we're in a good place right now? I mean, will you,
I do feel you're at a good place. I mean, you have these tax credit projects that have come in. They'll certainly help people reduce their housing costs. That may open up other apartment complexes for people to move in, and people who maybe can afford those a little bit
Right.
better. But yeah, the influx of tax credit projects is really important, and it's really good to see. I think you are at a good position in that regard, yeah.
good, thank you. Okay, anything else? Well, thank you again.
Thank you,
Thanks
Madam
for
Mayor.
being here.
Thank you.
Okay, and our third item here. We'll go ahead and Larry, you'll do the introductions.
Yes, Madam Mayor, members of the council, we're pleased to have our representatives from Cactus Mine here this evening, and they've got a PowerPoint presentation where they will provide an overview for the council on actually where they're at and their next steps. So George, you're ready to go?
I am.
All right.
Thank you. Well, thank you ever so much, councillors and mayor, for the opportunity to present here tonight. It's great to meet you all. So I'm George Ogilvie, the president and CEO of Arizona Sonora Copper Company. I'm joined this evening by Nick Huduk, my VP of Corporate Development, and Travis Snyder, undoubtedly you know, the VP of Sustainability and External Relations. As you may remember, just 5 years ago, the Cactus mine, or the old Sacaton mine, was $100 million plus liability for the taxpayers of Arizona. We've made absolutely tremendous progress on this project, and we believe that in the next 3 to 4 years, we can be producing copper cathode at a critical time for the US economy. And it's very interesting that we've been talking about school, and we've been talking about jobs and housing. You know, in the mining industry, the jobs tend to be paid much higher than the median, than the average. Typically, a mining job will average well above 100,000 US dollars. So that could be tremendous for the city as far as disposable income and drawing in new people to the area. So we have a very experienced executive team. Obviously, the executive of any company is very, very important. We've got lots of experience in managing operating mines over the course of our years of experience. We've also brought mines into production successfully. I'm very happy to say that the gentleman by the name of Bernie Lawyer is a 40-year veteran of the industry and is a native Arizonian. Bernie joined us almost 3 years ago and lives and resides in Casa Grande. So we're delighted that Bernie, brought his skill set and experience to this project. We've also got 25 people actually employed out at the Cactus mine. A lot of those individuals live and reside in and around the Casa Grande area. So obviously, as we grow this company, we believe that we'll be attracting more talent. Transformationally, next year is a big year for us, because if we greenlight the project at the end of 2026 and we complete the project financing, we're going to see a significant ramp up in the employment, and I'll show you that on a later slide. But we'll probably go from 30 people at the end of next year, probably north of 100 people within sort of 6 months heading into 2027. So we've made remarkable progress on this asset since acquiring it in 2020. You may remember at that time it was only a surface historical stockpile. It had 200 million pounds of copper in it. We knew there was mineralization within the old Sacaton open pit, because when you looked in, you could clearly see how it was all oxidized. We started drilling around there, and within 2 years, we'd increased the resource to 3.5 billion pounds of copper. Asarco had drilled where you see that number 3, which we call Park Salier, back in the 1970s and 80s. We knew there was mineralization there, but because it was deep, they decided not to pursue it. So we started drilling there heading into 23 and 2024, and we subsequently then increased the resource to approximately 8 billion pounds of copper in the ground. And then a transformational event occurred in March of 2024 when we picked up the property where you see the number 4 and 5, which we then called Mainspring, which belonged to a private landowner. The mineralization from Park Salier, as it extends south, it comes towards surface. So that means that we can now open pit Park Salier into a large new open pit, which is exactly the mining style that we're looking at within a pre-feasibility study that we just released in the last several weeks. So now we've actually grown the resource to 12.5 billion pounds of copper in the ground. Today, the copper price on COMEX sits at $5 US a pound of copper. So if you think about that, there's over close to $60 billion of revenue actually sitting in the ground there at a time when the US is going to be demanding more copper as we look for electrification and try and get away from decarbonization. We also have some significant shareholders in the company. So Hudbay Mining, who has the Copper World project just south of Tucson, That company has a market cap of just over $6 billion US. Today, they are a 9.9% shareholder in the company. They approached us last August when we came out with what's known as a preliminary economic assessment. And after conducting 4 months of due diligence on the project, including getting access to our virtual data room, coming to site, meeting with management, they invested $20 million into the company to take that 9.9% position. And then in July of this year, when we raised approximately 52 million Canadian dollars, they followed what we call are their investment rights, and they put another $6 million into the company to maintain that 9.9% position. We also have Royal Gold, which is probably the second largest royalty company in the world today. I think actually their market capitalization is closer to $15 billion today. And they hold a 2.5% net smelter royalty on the Cactus project, or at least they did. Earlier this year, we actually bought back 0.5% of that NSR for a cost of $7 million US, as we could clearly see that the mine was going to be very economical, and it's better that we buy back royalties when we can so that we can put those revenues into the shareholders' pockets and those of the stakeholders as the mine advances forward. And then about 3 years ago, we were approached by Newton, which is a division of Rio Tinto Copper. Rio Tinto Copper has a market capitalization of $90 billion, and today they are a 6% shareholder in the company. The point I'm making here is that you've got 3 world-class organizations that are invested in a junior mining company. If they did not expect the mine to go into production, they would not have invested monies into the company. So the PFS that we put out several weeks ago, we used a flat copper price of $4.25 a pound of copper, and it generated an NPV 8, using an 8% discount factor, of $2.3 billion US after tax, and the internal rate of return was just below 23%. We've got initially a 22-year mine life operation, and we'll be employing approximately 650 people on this project. For every job that gets created out at the mine, the rule of thumb is usually there's 2 to 3 other jobs which are created in the service industry. So that could be potentially anywhere from additional 1,200 to 1,800 additional jobs at the end of the day. You'll see a little bit later, but the mine plan is for conventional open pit mining. Most of the mining that is done in the state of Arizona is open pit mining, and most of that is your typical heap leach, where we put the ore on piles, we sprinkle it with sulfuric acid, and as the sulfuric acid works through, it leaches out the copper into a solution. We send that over to a big tank house where effectively we just pass a current within the solution, and the copper ions get attracted to the cathode plate, and over time it builds up a pure copper cathode, which can be sold directly to US industry for copper rod manufacturing or electrical wire manufacturing. So we're now embarking on what's known as a definitive feasibility study. We'd anticipate that that would be completed in the second half of next year. We're also in the process of making out our amended application for our final permits, which will allow us to construct and build the mine in the latter half of next year. And we're working on project financing. The capex for this project currently, to put it into production, the upfront capex is $1 billion US. But when we look at NPV to capex, we're sitting at a very healthy 2.4 to 1. Most other projects in the copper space, if they can get above 1-to-1 ratio, would be classified as good. So this one is exceptional. You all know where we're located, so we've got great infrastructure, which we're grateful for, and obviously we can leverage that with respect to having access to roads, power, rail, water, a community close by with a potential labor pool. And of course, with Tucson and Phoenix being also relatively close, there's lots of vendors and suppliers that we can draw skill sets from. When the mine goes into production, at 100,000 tons of cathode production a year, every year for 22 years, when we look at the current top 10 producers of copper mines in the United States today, this one would sit at number 4, equal with Baghdad. And when we look at it on a purely cathode basis, then this would rank number 3. So cathode is important because it doesn't have to leave the country and go for further smelting and refining. In North America, as environmental standards have become more restrictive in the last 20 years, a lot of the smelting and refining capacity is no longer there. Unfortunately, it's been taken up by China. So more than 60% of the world's copper that is actually produced is not in cathode, it's in concentrate, and it has to go to Asia, to China, to be turned into the finished product. The beauty of this copper cathode is it stays right within the United States, so it's a critical metal for the US economy and manufacturing. So we have water permits to the year 2070. We also have an abundance of water in the ground in a natural aquifer, which we call the basement fault. We have wells actually from the ASARCO days in the 1980s, which are still active today with pumps and piezometers, so we can measure the volume and the flow rate of water which is actually in the ground. And we see that there's more than enough water within that aquifer for all of our future business needs. We have access to the power line, which obviously comes from the Palo Verde nuclear plant just west of Phoenix. I think they've committed by 2030 to have 65% of their electricity on that line green energy, and 100% by year 2050. And as I referenced earlier, we have access to roads. Our initial plan is to send out our cathode using trucks. You're probably aware that the rail spur crossing over the road there is no longer there. But over time, with the appropriate planning, there is an ability to put a rail spur back in and take all of our product out via rail, which gives us a huge distribution system to the east or the west coast of the US. We've actually conducted 3 perception surveys on this project over the last 4 years. The last one was conducted in October of last year. 500 respondents. We used the same consultancy firm, the same set of questions, and we ended up with an 87% favorable rating to see the mine come back into production. And of course, we're in the heartland of the industrial zone within the city of Casa Grande. Now, onto the permits. Because we're on private land, when we make an application for a permit, as you're probably aware with no federal nexus, once that application is administratively accepted, and that can take a couple of weeks to a couple of months, but once it is, the clock starts ticking, and within 6 months, the state regulator must give us a response to our permits. So now that the pre-feasibility study is now public, and we don't see any material changes from the PFS to the bankable feasibility study in the second half of next year, we're currently making out those applications for the amended permits. And we would envisage that by probably the end of January next year, those applications would be administratively accepted, which therefore means by June or July of next year, we'll be in final possession of the permits that will allow us to construct and develop the mine. So we are committed to operating in a sustainable manner. Obviously, this mine was previously in production. There's a historic stockpile there, which we do intend to pick up over time and actually put onto properly designed, engineered leaching pads and recover copper from that. We're going to be contributing greatly to the economic activity of the local area. We see ourselves gaining access to 100% over time of green energy, and this will be American copper for US industry. Now, the numbers on the screen all come from a PEA that came out last August, but we know that this pre-feasibility study that we put out is actually superior to the preliminary economic assessment. We are going to have this report redone in the first quarter of next year, but we would expect the numbers to be better. But based on the PEA, we would be bringing in $15 billion of economic activity to Casa Grande and Pinal County. Over a 31-year mine life within the PEA, we were generating $3.2 billion in wages and salaries, and we would have been employing 400 people on the mine, with another 800 to 1,200 people in those services jobs, and we'd have been generating $2.2 billion in state, federal, and local municipal taxes. And our economists just did a rough calculation for the PFS, and those numbers on taxes are $2.34 billion. That's at $4.25 a pound of copper. If you were using the spot prices of over $5 today, I'd expect that number to be well north of $3 billion US dollars at over a 22-year mine life, which means there's more income, more taxes, more revenue coming in per year than what we were seeing previously. And then the other nice thing about this project is we have some claims just to the northeast of Park Salyer where there's a sliding scale royalty. It has not been negotiated yet with the Arizona State Lands Department, but at a minimum and 2% NSR at $4.25 a pound of copper, that would bring in $115 million over the first 10 years of production. And I believe that money actually gets allocated to the state school system, so it helps the students in the schools, which is a great cause. So I believe this is a quality project. It's a tier 1 jurisdiction. You've got a very experienced management team here. We will have future exploration success. We know there are areas on the mine where Asarco drilled 40 years ago, which we haven't explored, but they did hit mineralization. My resource geologists are telling me that when we go back to pure exploration, at the end of the day, we're likely to see 15 to 20 billion pounds of copper in global resource on this site, which obviously means that the mine life of mine probably can extend well beyond 30 years than the 22 years we're currently showing. So it's a 22-year mine plan. 600 jobs will be created, 1,200 to 1,800 indirectly, $2.3 billion in taxes, and of course we're taking care of our historical taxpayer liability. It's a brownfield site, it's conventional leaching, it's state-led permitting, and I believe today we still hold a very strong social license. So onto the sort of schedule, we spoke about, obviously the permitting. One of the other key aspects that we're working on is the project financing. So about 3 months ago, we engaged a group called Hanneman Partners out of London in the UK, who are financial advisors. Today, we've let 15 groups into our data room under a non-disclosure agreement. These would be export credit agencies like US Exim, EDC, KFW. We've got 5 or 6 commercial banks currently in the data room, and some of the private lenders as well. And we've already seen soft interest from some of those commercial banks for up to $100 to $250 million of potential funding. So the plan of action is now over the next 4 months, we'll allow them to conduct high-level due diligence. Early next year, we'll request proposals from them. We'll then whittle that group of 15 down to 4 or 5, which then becomes the main project syndication. On $1 billion upfront capital, we'll probably be looking at $600 million of debt, and $400 million US dollars of equity will have to be issued. Once we've selected the syndicate project syndication, we then bring in what's known as an independent engineer, and then over the course of the next 6 to 9 months, they conduct further due diligence, which means by the 4th quarter of next year, we'd anticipate that we would have commitment letters from the bank for the debt portion of the funding, and then we turn our attention to the equity component, and hence the reason why at the end of next year, with the monies committed, we're at what we call as a final investment decision. If we can break ground in the early part of 2027, then we have the ability by the second half of 2029 to see first copper cathode being plated here. And that concludes the formal part of the presentation.
Thank you, George. And thank you for being here. And I think you just flew in. Did you have some delays coming in?
Yeah, I
Is
had a
that-
3-hour delay, so I only arrived in Phoenix at 3 p.m. today.
I know. Well, thank you. We're glad you made it. And thank you for your team, for being here. I mean, Travis obviously has been, part of this community and does a great job with outreach and, giving people tours, I think during those Terminus days, you had people from the community just going out and giving tours. So we really appreciate your commitment to the community, showing what you're doing, and just being there and the support.
Thank you.
We're happy you're here to give this presentation. So I'll go ahead and open up for the council members if anyone has any questions or comments. Any questions or comments? No? Matt?
You came all the way down here. But I kind of echo what the mayor said, is you guys are already great community partners, and active in the community. And my personal history goes back, and Anthony's as well. Our dads worked at the mine together.
Oh, fantastic.
As a matter of fact, we found out. And it's always been a part of our community. And a neat thing about this project that you guys have taught me over the past couple of years is that there's already a hole there, right? We're going to have to do something with it one way or the other. And like you said, 100 million. So you guys actually found a way to make it profitable and not be a liability to, which I don't think that can be understated. So we're just looking forward to seeing how you do. And it was always like, what, one Super Bowl a year, you guys said?
That's right. With that economic activity, it's like bringing the Super Bowl every year to Casa Grande.
So yeah, and we're just looking forward to hearing more about it and wishing you guys luck on finding some more copper down there.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Yes.
No, just give them
Yeah,
thumbs
thumbs
up.
up.
Great.
Me and Travis been eyeing each other.
Oh, thank you ever so much. I appreciate it.
Thank
Sure.
you.
And did all of you take a tour? Did all the council members get to
I
take
did.
a tour?
I have.
Not yet?
Not
Okay,
yet.
Travis, we got to work on them getting the tour, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And we talked about that earlier, Nick, that there's 3 new council members, and of course myself as the mayor. I have had a tour, but it's good to be here to just give a background on who you are, what you're all about, and what you're planning to do. So many times we see it on paper, we hear briefly, so it's good to have the background on exactly what's happening and where you're going and what your timeline is. So I know we have some things that we're working on to move forward, and so Larry, what do you feel the next steps are going to be?
Well, Madam Mayor, members of the council, and Mayor, thank you for those comments. Absolutely agree. It's hard to believe that a decade ago we had a hole in the ground out there and there was a lot of discussion about what ultimately we were going to do with that. When I say we, a collective we, state, city, community. But these individuals have worked diligently. I know that we have been having discussions related to a potential effluent agreement. We left that off the presentation this evening specifically because of the dialogue that's been transpiring on that. I think the important message is that Nick, for those of you that have not had a chance to meet him, and I think everybody knows Travis at this point, that they have indicated that if individual council members would like to meet with them to discuss the project in more detail, that they'd be happy to do that. Certainly work through me to try to schedule something of that nature. But certainly next steps would be continuing the dialogue, potential dialogue on effluent purchase if that's where we're going to travel and likely have something back before the council in short order.
Okay. Okay. Any other questions, comments? No, not at this time. There might be after they all sleep on it.
Thank you.
But thank you again for being here.
Thank you.
Okay, so we'll go ahead and break, and we'll start the regular session at 7 o'clock. So thank you.